Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to our live stream today. We really appreciate the opportunity to be able to provide this content for you and getting the chance to spotlight different creatives from all walks of life, from all different sides of the industry. And so we are enjoying being able to provide this for you. So thank you for those who were able to in yesterday for interview with Mahati, and then also our workshop with Shreya about how to go live on social media. All of it really useful advice, some really interesting applications for it, and we are really appreciating all the feedback we're receiving. Now today, we're really excited about this new person we're getting to interview. Her name is Priya Krishnamurthy. She is both. She's been able to work on both sides of the camera. She majored in like journalism. She's been able to shoot documentaries, and now in recent years she has expanded, working as a consultant and getting her degree in arts management, and so working a little more from the management side of things. So she's seen a very large spectrum, both in India and in the U.S. So we're really excited about getting a chance to talk with her. Let's just jump right in here with the first question. So, as a self described storyteller and as someone who has worked both in the more creative side, hands on, to the more consulting, more behind the scenes management, you've discussed the role that storytelling has and its importance. So, could you elaborate a little more on your thoughts as to what is storytelling's role in the arts and how it can be used to talk about the value of the arts?
I think we need to understand as artists and as creators that we live in a society where there is stigma attached to creativity, and especially in the global south. And I have seen that also in in the West. And when we say there is stigma attached to creativity, which also means that there is then barriers to resources and how we want to then engage with that creativity. So unless we as creators, as makers, as storytellers go out there and tell the world that this is needed and we create value for it, and storytelling is a huge piece of creating value for why why artists are required, why craft is required, why just sitting home and doodling is required. um, Unless we go out there and tell those stories, we will never have a place on the table. And I think that is what how do we alleviate the stigma around what we do is what has been a huge part of my research and my work. And the more we go out there and collaborate and work with others to say, this is what we do, and this is why our work is valuable, and this is why it's needed in societies like this today, the more we have a better chance of um, being relevant going forward. Because let's understand, we are sitting in the middle of COVID, and um, communities have been affected across the world. And when some communities more than the others. But let's face it, that in this time, we have seen a tremendous spike in consumption of the arts and creativity. And be it Netflix, be it, all the museums that have opened up their collections, but people have been consuming creativity and the arts in so many different ways. But the bigger challenge now is that resources will be limited, which means we have to come out of this finding new ways to engage with our audience, using technology, and finding ways to collaborate not just within the arts but across other across other industries and sectors, because there is need for, I mean, we're all facing similar challenges. So in entrepreneurship, when you start looking at what are the challenges on ground, we start then saying, okay, you know what, this is how we can start engaging with our communities, as opposed to saying, okay, I'm an artist but I need to engage only in X way with X community. That then limits our audience, and it also limits the reach that is probable. And I think that intersectionality and that cross sector approach to working is what excites me.
Great. And as you said, there can be a lot of barriers between talking about the arts and their value and telling that story, honestly, even at the best of times. Trying to talk about the arts and why they're important and worth investing in and telling that story can be a difficult challenge for many people. There are many barriers in trying to get over some of the skepticism people can have. So honestly, sometimes our audience will be like, "Oh, I this art form is amazing. I love it." And sometimes have a little trouble treating other people to necessarily come or see that as well. because maybe they're not as involved in the arts. So, with that in mind, before we dig too much further into the COVID response, could you talk a little more about why you feel that the arts are important and why they're worth investing in?
I think, and I can speak for myself. I'll just give you a
Mm-hmm.
personal example.
Yes.
I always thought I wanted to. I've always been creative as a kid, and doodling, making things. And then the natural extension seemed to be that I'll work with storytelling, and I became a journalist, and so on and so forth. But um, somewhere along the line, I realized that it was important to marry uh, this creative, spark that I had in me with some sense of purpose. And I think that is the point where I realized that, this is the minute you marry what you're doing with a sense of larger purpose and contextualize it to a larger purpose of where we are living and what we're doing in life and in the world that we're living, suddenly it became so exciting. And there was a clear path that emerged. And I think as human beings, I've come across so many people who have transitioned from careers in law, in business, you name it. But they've got burnt out, and they've transitioned back into creativity. So inherently, there is a need within us as people and within communities to engage with creativity, to consume creativity, and to create more of it. Um, and that could be through the arts, that could be through craft. The how we do it does not matter, but to tap into that insight is important, that people need it today. And during COVID as well, it's become so apparent that people have turned to crafting, people have turned to art making. And as humans, we need creativity to make sense of the world. It helps us be critical, it helps our children grow better. It Arts is known to um, you know help children with their motor skills. It's known to help people with mental health. I think these are aspects that we need to recognize today and not be apologetic for it. I think as artists and as people who work in the arts, we approach our creativity and our arts from a place of apology. And I think we need to stop doing that and say, you know what? Here are the numbers. Here are how things work. Here is how your child is getting impacted and how he's growing up to be better, and is learning math and is better for it.
Mm-hmm.
And go out there and say, this is how we do it, and this is why we need a seat on the table.
Yes, you're right. There are a lot of practical benefits that the arts engage with that are sometimes overlooked, that are well documented. Whether it be by stimulating other parts of the brain to make it easier to learn, or by like video games helping kids learn how to do math or strategize, or crafts helping people keep their dexterity and also keep their mental processes fluid and active well into their golden years. There are numerous benefits that can sometimes be hard to incorporate into the story when we're trying to pitch why this stuff is important. And so you've talked a lot about in other interviews this idea of intersectionality, how in addition to the practical benefits, the arts also work for the cultural side, and that they are a way for people to tell their own story versus having a narrative imposed upon them. And that intersectionality where place, gender, age all kind of congregate, it is an important area to navigate. And with COVID, it has impacted significantly the arts from pretty much every angle, especially the live ones. And so, with that in mind, this idea of this wider arts community and having to learn a little bit from each other to help navigate this weird time is all the more important, whether it be by taking lessons from YouTube streamers or people who publish online content or trying to adapt your model. So, in the fields that you've worked with, how have you seen COVID impact them? And then, what do you feel artists should be doing to get through this time?
I've inhabited two spaces right now. So I've worked in helping fundraise for a museum in Boston, right in the middle of COVID, and I know that museums and artists across the U.S. and across the world have been impacted by the fact that there are no jobs. Everything is shut down, and suddenly the value of a museum or an art space has become irrelevant. And with a lot of these traditional spaces, we've also starting to recognize that they have not tapped into technology and not tried to tap into a wider community as effectively as they should have been, and limited their engagement with audiences to almost an in-person live experience. And I think now we need to start moving away from that and really. So that is one piece of it. From an Indian side, I've been working with craft with 200 million artisans, and there is there is so many artisans who've been affected by this, and there are so many enterprises and organizations that are also trying to understand how do we get rid of stock, how do we engage this new audience, how do we cut through the clutter, and how do we survive in the next just few months, because nobody has thought of an exit plan or a strategy for getting past COVID. um, and I feel right now is when people are starting to recognize that they really have to invest in how they work with their businesses and how they see their enterprises as serving a whole new audience and a whole new generation and a whole new in very different ways. And I think that is challenging, but also I feel it's an interesting time for the arts, because I'm hoping that this would also lead to innovation within the arts of how we engage um, with with the wider community,
Yeah.
and intersectionally.
Mhm. Mhm. Of course, yeah. And as you've mentioned 200 million artisans before, as an opportunity to try and create a sense of collaboration and community among artists during this crazy COVID time, and as one of the more recent organizations you've gotten to work with. You're right, especially as we've mentioned before, even in this interview, how it's so important for artists to use this opportunity to come together and learn from each other, collaborate with each other, perhaps in ways they may not have anticipated. Like we mentioned, the idea of learning from YouTubers or TikTokers or even just like dancers, museums. There's lessons that we can all take away and potentially team up and work with. So, could you talk a little more about the mission for 200 million artisans and the impact and ways that artists can get involved in building this community and this collaborative spirit and space?
So 200 million artisans is something that I set up while I was in Boston, when I realized that there was a huge information gap about organizations that required funds and who were struggling during COVID, and communities that wanted to support the diverse artisan communities and craft communities in India. So there were people in Boston who were like, we want to support organizations who need help during COVID, and there were organizations back in India that we said that we don't really know how to go about raising funds. So 200 million artisans became that bridge to one, plug the information gaps that currently exist within the craft sector, and two, how do we amplify organizations that need or voice amplify the voices of organizations that need help. So it is a volunteer driven space. It is part of the larger creative dignity movement in some ways. And I think the goal with that is to build a community around craft lovers, engage with them in meaningful ways. So we're not just serving those who need help, but we're also serving the larger community that is looking to engage with craft and that loves craft. So in that sense, I'm finding that there are a whole bunch of people out there that are willing to collaborate and who are willing to work in new and collaborative ways. And I feel 200 million artisans sort of stands for that kind of collaboration, this new age collaboration that is built on wanting to give back and wanting to serve your communities.
Okay.
And for now, it is a COVID crisis response platform.
Yeah, and so is there any criteria for artists to participate in this? Or can they come from any background, any medium, and potentially participate?
Oh, absolutely. We've seen collaborators reaching out to us saying, I'm an illustrator. How can I help you? Because the idea is to tell stories. 200 million artisans is also um, firmly believes that we need to tell stories, not just of our crowds, of our arts, of our artisans, of our communities, and bring the personal also into the public. So we are trying to work with all kinds of people right now to amplify the cause itself, which is to support the artisan communities in India.
Excellent. Yes. So we work with people from all over, people who are in rural areas, big cities, and everything in between. We work with people who have thousands of like Instagram followers, some that have two or may not even be on Instagram yet. So it's really nice to hear that there is an opportunity for all these people to be able to come together and work together and see things through this lens.
And the idea is also in some ways. So what it's an open call really. What I've told people, and I in an earlier discussion as well, that since it's a volunteer-driven movement, what we want is people from all walks of life to participate. So go to the website if you have an idea or a project that you think would be relevant to the 200 million artisans, mission in some ways. Come up with a project, lead it, own it, and run with it. The platform is available to you as long as it serves the wider or the larger mission of storytelling and storytelling for the creative, for the artisan communities. I think we are open to all kinds of collaboration, and I think people need a safe space to also experiment. And I think this becomes a safe space to collaborate and experiment.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. And so, hypothetically, if one of our followers were to join or come up with an idea or an initiative and pitch it to 200 million artisans, is there like a network that they get access to? Is there a way they can collaborate with other artists in the 200 million artisans network? Is there a Facebook group they get access to or can join where they can talk with other artists?
Right now, we are active only on the platform and Instagram. So you can take a look at the 200 million artisans Instagram. There are people who have tagged us on their personal stories. There are people who have tagged us on all kinds of things. We are in talks with other people, and especially people within the community itself, to host Instagram lives. So the field is really open right now, and all you have to do is come up with an idea that you think would be a great collaboration and would become a great intersection point. And 200 million artisans is open to all of it.
When it comes to talking about collaboration, it's even helpful if you want to apply for grants, but either way, there are a few downsides to thinking strategically a little more about your partnerships and collaboration opportunities with other artists. Okay, so thank you very much, but just one parting question. What is one piece of advice that you would give to arts entrepreneurs during this time to how they can succeed in the short to mid term?
I think the one piece of advice I would offer is look around you and find one, use technology and find new and interesting ways to use technology to engage with your audiences. Become part of a larger community to also then find new collaborations that can amplify the work that you're doing. Because what we are going to need is new ways of engaging with the arts. And that planning and that thought needs to be put in right now, and that needs to be tested out right now. So I would really urge anyone out there to take a step back and see how can we add a very different kind of value in a post-COVID scenario.
Okay, so everyone, if you can, look up 200 Million Artisans. You can find them on Instagram or you can look them up on their website. And thank you very much, Priya, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for tuning in. Look forward to more interviews from us and have a wonderful day.